before we go ahead and get started, I'd just like to say, yes, this is real. As in, it exists, it is a thing, it is in fact real. Second thing I'd like to get off the agenda is, it's actually really good. Yes, I'm serious. Really. It's great. Harry Potter becomes a space marine has no right to be this good, but it is for some reason. Inquisitor Carrow and the God-Emperorless Heathens, or as I like to call it, Harry Potter becomes a space marine, takes place during the events of Chamber of Secrets but in an alternate universe, where instead of being rescued by the Weasleys at the beginning of the second book, Harry almost gets starved to death by his aunt and uncle until the God Emperor whisks him away to the Imperium of Man, circa 40k. Oh, hey, buddy. My co-host here, Caiaphas Cat, who's apparently going to be joining us tonight. They don't really go into too much detail as to what happens to Harry after that point. There are plenty of lore videos on what it takes to become a space marine, so I'm sure it was pretty horrific, whatever it was. But Harry Potter, or as he likes to be called now, Inquisitor Carrow, you see where the title came in? He's sent back in time about 38,000 years through the webway due to falling into a warp portal and undergoing warp shenanigans. As you do. So in Inquisitor Carrow's time, which is what we're going to be calling him throughout the rest of the book, it's about 297 years. Whereas in Hogwarts time, it's been only a few months, basically at the start of the school year. So for all intents and purposes, this story takes place in the same way that your regular Harry Potter stories do, but starting from book 2. So in this one, the Chamber of Secrets is being investigated by a Space Marine Inquisitor. And just to get this out of the way, yes, Carrow is both an Inquisitor and a Space Marine. Apparently the writer wasn't really intending to make him a space marine at the beginning, but it does make the book a lot more interesting. And they sort of address it by saying that Carrow was trained by the Charnel Guard, who are a subchapter of the Blood Angels, but he doesn't officially belong to any chapter. Something that he almost comes to blows with the Ultramarines over. That's right, Inquisitor Carrow hates the Ultramarines as much as everyone else does. He's the most relatable space marine character. Anyway, Carrow gets launched through a webway gate and ends up at Hogwarts, basically in the modern day, circa 1992, I think. And everyone's freaked out by this giant man in gianter armor that's just teleported onto the school grounds. By the way, Inquisitor Carrow's not just a space marine and an inquisitor, he's also a librarian, given that he has active psyker powers by the time he's found by his daddy Inquisitor in the year 40,000. I know I'm kind of skipping around when it comes to his origin story, but they haven't really revealed much yet, at least as far as I've read, between this book and its sequels. And yes, there are sequels. There are sequels to Harry Potter Becomes a Space Marine, and yes, they are also good. Just to answer your next question, which I know you guys were asking. So they have to get Hagrid and the burliest 7th years they can find to lug his several tons of Space Marine armor plus Space Marine weight. And you can tell the author did his research about both of the worlds that he's writing about. See, Space Marines give off this naturally menacing aura. Unless you're a salamander, in which case you give off love beams, I guess. You must taste my friendship rays. Pew! Not sure what that was either. Let's move on. So everyone's super creeped out by this guy before he even starts moving around. They put him in the infirmary and about 3 days later he wakes up, nearly giving Snape a heart attack in the process. By the way, Carrow and Snape actually end up developing this really weird but honestly kind of fun friendship. Because yeah, if there's anybody that would get along with the Inquisitor world, I guess it'd be Snape, considering he's used to the whole espionage game, given all the sneaking around he does in these movies. And since this is the second book, Professor Lockhart is there, if you guys remember him. The kind of doofusy stolen valor guy that actually turned out to be kind of a psycho near the end. He's convinced that the reason Harry looks the way he does now is because of a spell gone wrong. So he casts some magic at Carrow thinking that it'll reverse the effects, and it doesn't really do anything. And Carrow, in retaliation, and I quote, punches him gently, which knocks him unconscious because yeah, even if a space marine punches you gently, that's still gonna give you a bad time. I like to imagine he just went against his skull and it put him in a week-long coma. So he explains his backstory to everyone and the fact that he's 297 years old. And everyone acts really shocked by this, which makes me wonder, how long do wizards live? Because you'd think they'd be able to extend their lifespans with magic or something, but I guess not. Like, not live forever, I'm sure, but, you know, it's magic. Like, you can't magically reinforce your heart a little bit, keep it ticking on for another, like, 5 or 6 decades longer than it usually would. Anyway, once they figure out who he is, Dumbledore tries to reintroduce him to his old wizarding life by showing him various things that were near and dear to him. So he shows him his old school robes and his magic books and his old wand. He ends up burning the books because apparently there's nothing in there that he would even be remotely interested in. Turns out magic people are even overpowered in the Warhammer universe as opposed to Harry Potter. So that doesn't really do anything but give him the idea that he can go to Gringotts and get all of his money, which he plans to invest in several companies. He's been conscious for about a day in this world and he's already planning on investing. One interesting aspect about this particular series is that wizard money apparently works with Muggle companies. Like, he makes plans to invest in Nokia because it's 1992 and that's still profitable at this point, but his family only had wizarding money, at least as far as I know. I could be wrong about that. I guess you can be rich in both if you make wise financial decisions, but having to operate in normal people money is hard enough, you know? I can't imagine his parents having the time and effort to build up both the wizarding and Muggle fortunes that apparently they have now. God, I just realized this lighting makes me look like I'm wearing a turtleneck. I'm really not. That's just, I had to work with, I made lemonade.
When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Make life take the lemons back. Get mad!
I had some good lighting going earlier, but then the cat jumped on it, and then that's gone now. Thank you, Caiaphas. Just sitting in my lap, cleaning his paw, like completely innocent. Yeah, I've been doing nothing wrong, right? I've been sitting here and being a good boy while my master talks to the TV. They have a funny little moment when they're trying to give him just regular wizard's clothes, where Dumbledore gives him some Gryffindor robes, and he gets mad because he's like, do I look like a filthy cardboard to you? Because yeah, the Gryffindor colors are the same colors that Skitari wear in the Warhammer universe. So that's cool. I like it. That's called attention to detail right there. So how are we gonna force this powerful Inquisitor slash Space Marine character to stay at this school for children for the rest of the book? They do have a workaround for that, seeing as he's still legally considered a minor, given that in Hogwarts time he's only been gone for a few months. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic at this time, promises to pass a bill that'll fix this. They don't really go into detail about what the bill entails.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill.
But I'm sure it requires the bending of many laws to get this happening. But politics works about as quickly in the wizarding world as it does in the regular Muggle world, so it's gonna take a little bit. Just long enough for one book, as a matter of fact. So if you were curious as to how the Chamber of Secrets gets introduced, Carrow finds it almost immediately. Like, he's sitting and having his first breakfast in the Great Hall, and then he looks over at Ginny Weasley and goes, huh, that child's possessed. Weird, I guess I'm gonna have to watch her from now on. And when the photographer kid gets paralyzed by the basilisk, as he does in the original book, Carrow can smell the basilisk, I think, and he traces it back to the bathroom. It's like, huh, weird, looks like there might be a secret passage there. Well, I'll check that out later. I'm sure no harm can come of not investigating this right now. They don't really explain why he doesn't just end the problem immediately, because he totally could, but they had to drag it out for the entire year, I guess, like they did in the original book, so I get it. The author's working on what he's got. It's called Harry Potter Becomes a Space... It's not called Harry Potter Becomes a Space Marine, but that's basically what it is, so you gotta write with what you got. So in the meantime, Dumbledore decides to try to jog his memory by introducing him to Ron and Hermione. Hermione almost has a mental breakdown upon seeing him as an adult. Starts going on about how she was scared he'd been, like, kidnapped or tortured and just generally had bad times. And he goes, oh yeah, I was kidnapped and tortured, but they made me stronger, so it's okay. And Carrow doesn't really know how to deal with children, so he gives them the Turing test from Blade Runner. It's not called the Turing test, it's supposed to be like a psychological evaluation, but it's basically the kind of questions he's asking. It's like, you see a turtle flipped over on its back in the desert, what do? Do you help it?
The tortoise lays on its back, its belly baking in the hot sun, beating its legs, trying to turn itself over, but it can't. Not without your help.
Eventually, Hermione gets angry and punches him in the face, and his response to this is, the girl has fire. Actually, the phrasing they use here is a little bit weird, so let me pull it up real quick. Little Miss Granger was a very interesting person indeed, and he wanted her. Interesting choice of words there. I'm pretty sure stranger danger still existed in the 90s. Like, you can't write that down and not know how that sounds, you know? Apparently I can rhyme accidentally, but the author can't make accidental pedo references. So Snape takes Carrow to Gringotts to collect his wizard fortune, and all he wants in return is the brainstem of an acromantula, which are those giant spiders from the second movie. And I'm sure you can guess where it goes from here. So Inquisitor Carrow goes out into the Forbidden Forest, grabs Aragog by the neck, drags him back to the Great Hall, kicking and screaming the whole time, and disembowels him in front of the entire student body. It's glorious. Hagrid starts crying and everything. It's great. So Aragog's dead for the rest of the series. Fred and George Weasley try to prank Carrow. They don't really specify how they do it, but apparently he can just sniff it out because he's not only an Inquisitor, he's got those Space Marine senses enhanced to where he can literally sniff out trouble from a mile away. And he pranks them back, and they also don't specify what he did, but apparently it caused them to shit themselves. But it's all good because he leaves a note out from a forbidden textbook on how to make a giant mechanical spider, which they use to traumatize Ron, so it's fine. So how do you say that name? Gilderoy. So Goldie Lockhart decides to make a dueling club, just as he does in the original print of the second book, which of course Carrow attends. So Snape absolutely punks Lockhart like he does in the original, and then after this has a duel with Professor Flitwick. Gonna go off on a tangent real quick. Flitwick has always sounded a little bit dodgy as a name. Am I the only one that thinks that sounds vaguely perverted? No, just me? Okay. The two duel it out, Carrow being absolutely enraptured the entire time. And after the fight's over, Carrow goes, "Oh man, that was a great show right there. How would I apply it to a real life battlefield?" Like say there's a large scale fight going on, like a planet wide wall, let's just say theoretically. How would I go about dealing with that with magic? And they have to explain to him that they don't really have large scale fights in the Wizarding World because of the secretive nature of the Wizarding World, which I'm calling bullshit on that. You're telling me Voldemort would care if the Muggles got to figuring out that he exists? Like, I'm sure there have been plenty of dark wizards throughout the ages that have had that kind of attitude, but that's just how people use magic in this universe. So if they want to be impractical about this, Carrow's going to take advantage of it either way. So he actually does make pretty short order of any of the normally terrifying obstacles they'd have to deal with in this series. But in either case, Carrow decides to start putting forth effort into learning more about the Wizarding World, and defense magic in particular, just for his own ends. Now, you'd think being an Inquisitor and a Space Marine, he would have had everybody executed for heretical psyker magic bullshit. But if he did that, we wouldn't have a book, would we? So we're just gonna ignore that for now. By the way, this is an aside, and I probably should have mentioned this a lot earlier in the summary, but Carrow was trained by a Scout Sergeant Tarkus. I don't think it's the same Sergeant Tarkus that we see in Warhammer Dawn of War 2, but I like to imagine that it probably is. In this universe, he joined the Charnel Guard and never got past Scout rank. If he was a real fan, he would have said Scout Sergeant Cyrus pushes up glasses aggressively. Another fun thing that happens is that Carrow attends the Defense Against the Dark Arts classes that Gilderoy Lockhart is teaching, and he basically browbeats him into admitting that he's a fraud and just mentally breaking him down. Again, they don't specify how he does this, but he's an Inquisitor. I'm sure he can make it happen. Which makes me wonder what would happen if Inquisitor Carrow was to meet Caiaphas Cain, given that they're basically the same character, except Caiaphas Cain is actually likable, and he's a lot less full of himself. Which is interesting, because Caiaphas Cain has actually been around Space Marines for like extended periods of time, and they haven't really been able to sniff out that he's a fraud yet. On the other hand, he has met Inquisitors before. He's only met 2, at least at the point I'm at in the series. But like all things Caiaphas Cain, he got really lucky with that. The first one he met ended up becoming his girlfriend, and the second one he met was absolutely insane and not very observant in general. So I don't know, it's kind of up in the air as to how Carrow would react. But back on topic, even when I'm not talking about Caiaphas Cain at all, I still gotta bring him up in every Warhammer video I do on this channel. So Carrow decides to make himself more at home, so he gets to work making servitors. But Sloan, aren't servitors usually made from lobotomized convicts? How would he go about making servitors in this day and age?
I'm glad you asked.
By grave robbing, of course. Then collecting several helpful volunteers from Nocturne Alley. At least the ones that are stupid enough to try to mug a Space Marine. Which even if you didn't know what a Space Marine was, they're like 9 feet tall and weigh about 1,000 pounds. And whenever we see them, they're always in power armor, so why you would try this? I mean, there are characters that do it in Warhammer. They know what Space Marines are, and they attempt it anyway, and it usually ends about the same. He also gets a pet vampire that may or may not have Down syndrome. I'm not saying that as a joke either. He might actually have gotten a Down syndrome vampire for a pet. Like, they kind of imply she's feral, but there are vampires that can talk normally, and are civilized and everything. But this vampire is like half starved when he finds her, and she's hissing at people and just generally doesn't know how to take care of itself, so I'm not sure. I mean, it would make sense that he would employ her, given that this is the same universe that Ogrins exist in, and people are fine with that. But he starts feeding her with the same methods, namely by going crime fighting in Nocturne Alley, and then feeding her the remains of the ensuing battles. Also, the God-Emperor is technically still around during this time period in canon, so he starts writing him letters. Inquisitor Carrow and the God-Emperor become pen pals. What? And yes, Inquisitor Carrow starts every letter that he sends to him with, "Dear God Emperor," because of course he does. Remember, the God Emperor is not really the God Emperor at this point. The Unification Wars hasn't started. He's not on his golden throne. He's just a regular perpetual guy who happens to be the most powerful psyker in the entire universe, but still. The God Emperor, mind you, has no idea the Wizarding World exists somehow. Even though he's a psyker, you'd think he'd be able to feel it with his psychic presence. They don't really say it outright, but Carrow guesses at one point that the Wizarding World gets wiped out about 2 centuries after the events of Harry Potter, which I guess is how they get around that little plot point, by just not addressing it. Which I guess is the best thing you can do with this concept. Alright, so I'm recording this about a week after the initial summary, and I got to editing this part of the video, and it turns out there's a reason he picks the specific time period of 2 centuries from now as the point where the Wizarding community just up and vanishes. So after doing some basic skimming of the Warhammer wiki, I've come to discover some things. Apparently around the time that Carrow specifically mentions in the book, psychers are scientifically proven by the world at large to be a thing. See, before this point in the Warhammer lore, it was either considered superstition or just religion or whatever you want to call it whenever somebody started manifesting psychic powers. But it specifically says around the 23rd century is when psychers were scientifically proven as a thing. As in, they became a part of society at large. Now, it could just be a coincidence, but it's also a little bit too coincidental, you know? No, you don't. I'm explaining this terribly. Okay. Just know that the reason the Wizarding World is no longer around during that time period has to do with that revelation, so at least I think they're connected. This is again from my basic skim of the Warhammer wiki, so take this with a grain of salt. Oh yeah, and he and Hermione start warming up to each other after a bit, to the point where Hermione invites him home to her parents' place, because that would elicit a very positive reaction if your 12-year-old child brought home a 3,000-pound, 9-foot-tall man, a fully grown adult, just showing up for Christmas, din-din. So they actually managed to have a nice Christmas vacation, mainly because Hermione's mom gets the hots for Carrow. I don't know if this is a thing in canon, but they imply that Carrow has pheromones that he's constantly secreting that makes women automatically super attracted towards him. Either that, or they see the 9-foot-tall, 3,000-pound man and go, man, he's probably got something going on down there. They probably don't circumcise their space marines that badly. Actually, they probably do. It's the Warhammer universe, but they don't really go into detail on that, so let's be optimistic here. He stays with them for a few weeks, and he's constantly asking questions like, how does this toaster work? What do light bulbs do? He's having a grand old time because he gets to figure out all these sacred secrets that the Adeptus Mechanicus keep from mankind. And by the second book, he goes, wow, the Mechanicus are a bunch of dipshits. Why, do they think the ritual of activation is what gets their machines going? No, you plug it into the wall. So the vacation ends and they go back to Hogwarts. And even though they already did the troll in the dungeon bit from the first book, they decided to redo that because having him not face off against Harry Potter as a Space Marine was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. Carrow carves it up like a Christmas ham, again in front of the entire student body and faculty. And around this time, Carrow decides it's time for me to get into government. Because he's an Inquisitor, he's trained to sniff out heretics, he's used to having a lot of power to do it with, so it's the best plan, at least from his point of view. And since his parents technically had a seat on the Wizengamot, which is their big Ministry of Magic seat of power, the big tribunal that passes certain bills and makes sure it gets put into... Man, I don't know real life government. What makes you think I'm gonna know wizarding government? Anyway, apparently they pass down positions of power through bloodlines, which is a very effective way of running your government. So Carrow gets a seat of power. If you're wondering how everybody in the Ministry of Magic views Harry Potter, given that last year he was an 11-year-old boy and now he's a space marine, they all just assume he had dormant giant blood in him that hit him like a truck. And Carrow immediately goes, wait, you guys kept all the Death Eaters alive? The ones that almost managed to topple the wizarding government and kept everyone terrified for decades? Well, I am going to fix that. So he makes plans to kill Lucius Malfoy, who seems to be the biggest threat at the moment. It's okay though, because Lucius Malfoy wants to kill him too, so morally justified. Yup. He also makes an observation that Lucius Malfoy is gay because he really cares about his appearance, which is surprisingly a very 90s viewpoint to have on that. They never really toppled the subject of homosexuality in the 40k universe, probably because it's not really a story that you can delve deep into that much in the Warhammer universe. I mean, you could explore that with Warhammer, but why that setting in particular, right? Like, does Warhammer need to be the property that tells this story? I mean, here's the thing, the Imperium of Man and the God Emperor worship and all that is kind of a parody of our own religious institutions, so it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to assume they didn't approve of homosexuality. That's the thing, you could go either way with that, it just depends on who's writing for them at the time. But initially, Carrow plans to use that information as blackmail, which is interesting that the wizarding world apparently views this as a terrible thing, which again, I guess it's the 90s, but still, it's kind of weird to think about, considering that homosexuality is the one subject that J.K. Rowling has been on the nose about politically. Like, it's the one thing that you can go, wow, J.K. Rowling was right about a thing. Anyway, back to Malfoy, the adult, not child Malfoy. Although I think Carrow wants to kill him too. So you get the perspective from both characters, and they both pretty much think the exact same thing. Wow, this guy seems pretty impressive, but he could also be a threat. Let's poison him. So Lucius doesn't really figure out that Carrow is trying to poison him until it's too late, whereas Carrow figures it out almost immediately, because Inquisitor, you know, he's had to deal with worse than this. He's lived his entire life basically in the 40k universe, and then some. If there's one person he doesn't have to worry about, it's Lucius Malfoy. He figures out almost immediately that Malfoy's trying to poison him, initially trying to get Snape to do it, which Carrow actually welcomes as a challenge. He's like, yeah, feed me all the poisons. So Snape feeds him all the poisons. He tries cyanide, he tries arsenic, he tries wizardly potions, nothing works. Like, here's a potion where one drop will cause all your organs to turn inside out. Chugs the entire thing in one go. Ooh, that gave me a bit of heartburn right there. Oh wait, no, it's gone. So Snape just gives up after a bit. Oh yeah, the Chamber of Secrets was a thing, wasn't it? So Professor Lockhart gets murdered in his office by a possessed Ginny Weasley, who also may have eaten some of his organs, the author implies. So that's a nice wholesome family image to put on ABC Family for you. She also removes his skeleton. So Inquisitor Carrow, Snape, and Dumbledore go check out his office, and they don't find his skeleton, but there is lots of skin and lots of blood, and several organs, some of which are conveniently missing. Again, I'm not saying she ate some organs, but she ate some organs. Took one look at his corpse and went, I'm making me some kidney beans. I will not apologize for that pun. So Snape, Dumbledore, and Carrow have to hunt down Lockhart's possessed skeleton, which is a fun little scene until Carrow just wipes it out with warp fire. So as appreciation for doing his staff and students a favor, Dumbledore makes him the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Nobody really questions Lockhart's disappearance. Nobody really misses him, to be honest, because you wouldn't. They're like, oh, he's mysteriously vanished and decided to live in Romania for the rest of his days in complete isolation. I'll buy that. So Carrow looks at the student body and goes, man, what a bunch of privileged pussies. Never even had to deal with death in their lives. Haven't had to cradle their dying comrade in arms as he's had his legs ripped off by a rampaging orc. Bunch of privileged white kids. So Inquisitor Carrow decides to teach them the basics of hand-to-hand combat. He does this by installing a dueling pit and having them face off against an Acromantula. Again, those giant spiders from the second movie. Needless to say, the students are pretty traumatized by this. Most of them have PTSD for the rest of the series, and that's just that. When they inevitably get injured, he doesn't let them go to the infirmary. Well, you still got all your limbs attached, it's fine, don't be a bitch. much. Which makes you wonder why Dumbledore thought it was a good idea to make him the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, but when you compare him to the rest of the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, he's not that bad. At least this one wasn't literally possessed by Lord Voldemort, something that somehow everybody in the school seemed to miss for months on end. You know what, Inquisitor Carrow is actually right. These students need to learn to defend themselves, because clearly the teachers won't. So eventually Inquisitor Carrow decides it's time to deal with the basilisk, so he takes out his plasma pistol and shoots it in the head. Yes, he really does deal with it that easily. It's not even an issue. Oh wait, I forgot to mention his first attempt at dealing with the basilisk. So his first attempt, he gets stopped because he looks it directly in the eye. This is the second petrification that's shown in the books and movie, but he obviously manages to survive this. According to him, because of his faith in the God Emperor that kept him from the brink of death, he kind of just walks it off. It's great. Second time, he's prepared, so he shoots the basilisk in the face with a plasma pistol, and it's down for the count. Unfortunately, since Carrow hasn't really been introduced to the Diary of Tom Riddle at this point, he doesn't really know to stab the book, so instead he has to perform an exorcism on Ginny, during which he has Snape, who was with him at the time, go and grab the girl and run off with her to the infirmary, which causes a weird alternate timeline where Snape is on really good terms with the Weasleys. It's really weird. They think of him as a favorite uncle after that point. But either way, Carrow deals with the demon by using psychomagic, as you do, and initially wants to burn Ginny alive to keep her chaotic taint from spreading. Of course, he can't really do that in this time period because generally that's frowned upon. So he has to settle for searching psychically inside her mind and seeing if she has any chaotic taint to her. In the process of doing this, he actually becomes an avatar for the God Emperor, which is weird because the God Emperor isn't really aware of the Wizarding World during this time period, but warp travel makes time all funky, so it does make sense. The God Emperor would have a presence through all time periods, which opens up a lot of possibilities when you think about it. But we don't really have time to get into those possibilities, and clearly the author didn't either, because he doesn't explore this any further. So anyway, Ginny is cleansed of chaotic taint. Professor Snape and the Weasleys are best friends now. Cats are living with dogs. It's great. God bless America. Lucius Malfoy still comes to visit like he does at the end of the original book, but this time he's not interrogated by Dumbledore about the existence of Tom Riddle's diary. This time he's interrogated by Inquisitor Carrow, who promptly poisons him through a handshake. He has a little tiny Inquisitor needle that he pokes inside of him that causes him to get poisoned. It's really subtle, and I'm sure Warhammer technology can make it happen without him noticing. So Lucius Malfoy is dead under somewhat mysterious circumstances. The official cause is labeled as stroke, but apparently wizards just don't get strokes. They specifically say that in the book, which makes me again wonder why wizards don't just live basically forever, because apparently they have the technology to ward off strokes. The wizard technology, I guess, but technology nonetheless. And Carrow uses this opportunity to basically take all of his political power in the Ministry of Magic. And the book promptly ends with Dumbledore writing to the God Emperor of Mankind, because he remembers Carrow mentioning something about that, and he does a little bit of digging and research as to who it might possibly be. Apparently the God Emperor is a genetic physicist in Switzerland, by the way, doing his God Emperor thing, where he subtly influences events in the background. So as far as Harry Potter becomes a space marine, this was great. Like, it's written in the same style that J.K. Rowling uses, you almost can't tell the difference. The author's clearly a fan of both Harry Potter and Warhammer and did his best to make sure he respects the lore of both. Now that being said, he kind of does have to stretch the rules at points, which, yeah, again, makes sense. These aren't really canons that have anything to do with each other, and for the most part he gets everybody's characters down. Everyone except Dumbledore. Dumbledore loses his temper a lot over the course of this book, which with any other character it would make sense given the stress of having to deal with an Inquisitor Space Marine that just keeps causing shenanigans in your castle. But Dumbledore should have more patience than he shows in this book. In the sequels he kind of rectifies this. I think he realized that he made Dumbledore into too much of a angry headmaster stereotype. Dumbledore is not the principal from Saved by the Bell. I can see him being surprised by Carrow's antics, but I can't see him getting that angry over them, with a few exceptions. One of them being when he accidentally stumbles on one of Carrow's servitors and it almost kills him. Having one of those things in a school full of children, yes, I would get angry as well. Also, the fact that he made Carrow the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, knowing that he is like he is, that was a pretty ill-advised decision. I mean, it is consistent somewhat with his teacher hiring practices, but still. I think the first book was written to be a standalone thing because obviously why would you make sequels to Harry Potter Becomes a Space Marine? Because he expands on a lot of concepts in the sequels that are kind of set up here. This one's definitely focused more on comedy than anything else, whereas the sequel and the third book in the series, which is about as far as I've got, they do focus on comedy, but they have a lot more action and drama to them. Plus, they're not as contained to Hogwarts as the first one. So you generally have less of your standard Hogwarts storyline where you go to the school, you spend a year there, magic shenanigans happen, and then Voldemort or one of his followers might show up at the end. They also don't really do much with Ron Weasley, which is kind of like the movies for Harry Potter, so there's definitely a trend there. Would have been nice to see him interact with Carrow a bit more, but they kind of focus more on Hermione, again, much like the movies, which it makes sense that Carrow would take more of an interest in her as kind of his pseudo-apprentice, given that she's probably the most capable character in all of Harry Potter. That is, if your name's not Snape or Dumbledore. I also would have liked to go a little bit more in depth on Carrow's backstory, but I think they might be saving that for either a sequel, like in a flashback form, or a prequel. But at least I'm kind of interested enough to want to know how that got started. Like, how did Harry Potter handle getting all of his skin peeled off so they could stick cables under it and then stitch it back on? That's pretty much exactly what you would imagine with someone who's not only a space marine but an Inquisitor interacting with just general Hogwarts characters. They have a lot of fun with that. I enjoyed it the first time I read it. I enjoyed the second time I did for this review, so definitely check it out at least once. I'm actually about 3/4 of the way through the third book in the series, so I've genuinely been enjoying it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and you'll join me for its sequel, The God-Emperor Makes the Hoverboard from Back to the Future. Yes, that actually happened. And if you want to help me out, the YouTube algorithm needs souls. It's hungry and it thrives off soul power. So if you guys could please leave a like, subscribe, or a comment, or just general activity, that'd be dandy. We must feed the maw of the YouTube algorithm with souls. Anywho, I'll see you guys later.